Welcome to Drinks Coach. Yeah, I'm back again. This is part 2 of a kind of review of the press tasting I did at Tesco's a few weeks ago, and I'll continue with other retailers. Just to give you guys the heads up on some wines which I think are really delicious going into Christmas and the autumn period. And I did 5 white wines in the last show. Now let's do the rest. So I've got, just to explain again, there was a good 20 or 30 wines in the press tasting out of 130 or 40, which I thought were really outstanding at the Tesco's press tasting. And I sent an email saying how much I loved them. They very kindly sent me 10 back. Because I said I'd quite like to feature some in the show. So they selected 10 for me, so I'm going to do all of them. So we did 5 whites last time. Now we've got this hodgepodge, this kind of motley crew of leftovers. This is Vinesack, Drinks Coach UK, or lowercase. Those are my handles. Please ring the bell and hit subscribe on this channel on YouTube if you're interested in getting notifications of updates. Coming up to Christmas, I'll be featuring wines from Majestic, from Sainsbury's, from Waitrose, hopefully, Co-op, and maybe a few independents, Adams and Southwold. A few people haven't asked yet, but hopefully this is an opportunity for me to help you do some of your Christmas shopping from afar, especially if everyone gets poorly again this Christmas, which I'm rather worried people might. COVID's been far too quiet. Anyway, so here we have 5 lovely wines, I think, and they're follow-on from the ones from before. And by the way, as I filmed these, remember I did 152 shows before I stopped doing it. I burnt out a bit, but things became quite second nature. So if this is all looking a bit amateurish and a bit crap, it's because I'm trying to remember what I did in the past. We're sitting here in the den, and yeah, that's all I have to say. So bear with me as I get back up to speed. I hope you're finding what I say informative and entertaining. Anyway, so there were a few fizzes actually, which I thought were very, very good. They had this, just happened to have this sample lying around there, the office of the PR company, and so I'm very grateful to have one fizz to show you. Did you know that Tesco's has 2 Tesco's finest Proseccos? Now, right, okay. I know I slag off Prosecco from time to time, but I've also been very, very open about the fact that if there's nothing else, I'll drink it. And there's a big difference between very basic Prosecco and very commercial Prosecco and high quality Prosecco. Oh, I can't get the thing out. I'm just going to try the old-fashioned way. There we go. So this is the posher of the 2 Proseccos that Tesco sell. I've got the prices down here. Yes, so this is the poshest of the 2. It's $9.50. It's made by a very good producer, Macchio. If I show you the label, there we go. This is Prosecco Superiore, and it also, if you see that label on the front, you can tell which one's the poshest one because it says Valdobbiadene. Easy for you to say, yeah. So Valdobbiadene Prosecco is from a more distinct region around the original hills near Treviso. And Valdobbiadene is where all of the best Prosecco comes from. Prosecco, because it's become so popular, they've planted further and further and further away from its epicenter, to the point now where they had to decide that a lot of the stuff outside, because the old rules were that if you planted next to a vineyard that had a certain appellation, you got that appellation because it would be unfair that your neighbour has and you didn't. But now we're in a situation where a lot of sparkling wine is made from the grape variety Glera, which is the Roman name of a grape variety we used to call Prosecco, which has now been nominally given the moniker of the region, not the grape variety, if you understand. So when you buy Prosecco used to be made from Prosecco. It's now made from Prosecco, but we don't call it Prosecco, we call it Glera, so that if you're outside the region where they think Prosecco should be made, you can only call it Glera Frizzante, right? Okay, so there we go. I hope that was that explanatory. But this is the Tesco's finest product in a lovely package, I think. I love the bottle. There we go. That's a nice shaped bottle. Lovely, healthy pop. So why this? Why am I talking about this Prosecco when I can tell people not to buy Prosecco in the main? Well, I'll tell you why. It's because it's brut. When you buy some very well-made Proseccos out there from other supermarkets, Very specifically, I'm going to pick on Waitrose and I'm going to pick on Sainsbury's. The taste of difference and the Waitrose Premium Prosecco, they're 18 grams of sugar, 23 grams of sugar. These things are sweet. The reason why people like them is because they're sweet, fizzy pop. And I think they're appealing to the vagaries of the mass market. But also, even if it's inadvertent, they're still appealing to a younger audience, which I think is kind of wrong. People should be forcing the younger audience to drink better wine so they can decide if they want to drink it or not. No, I don't know, but basically this is a wine that's 10 grams per litre. 10 grams per litre is well inside the regulations required for champagne to be called Brut. And I think for that reason, this is a supermarket Prosecco, which I will promote and drink, and I like. And it's great in cocktails because there isn't much sugar getting in the way. The sugar does make drinks taste fatter and fruitier and have a longer finish. But if you're honest about it, that's a very large consumption of sugar. If you're looking at a bottle of wine, which has got 20 odd grams, 25 grams of sugar, that's like 5 teaspoons of sugar in every bottle. That's like a can of Coke, right? Don't do it. Okay. It's cool though, right? £9.50. What does it taste like? Well, it's got a lovely pale colour. Beautiful, bready, but super fresh nose. It doesn't smell of marzipan, which is a sign of age. It doesn't smell that as a frangipane, slightly kind of caramelised edge, which a lot of, by the way, you people out there buying the cheapest Prosecco you can find, you're vibing with me now, right? I mean, they all taste of marzipan and stuff. That's because they shouldn't. They should smell of fresh, crisp Granny Smiths and crab apples. It's got this lovely, almost mouth-watering tartness when you sniff it. It's not going to be the head of Mensa. It's not going to cure cancer. It's not a genius drink. This is a perfectly well-made, simple Prosecco done properly. And if you can add any number of things to this and turn it into a magical drink, or drink it on its own. If we're going to make an Aperol Spritz, I want my Prosecco to be this dry. So this is the one I choose. Remember that. Tesco's finest Valdobbiadene Prosecco. Also, it's very good if you add a shot of gin. A single shot of gin, your favourite gin, in a Prosecco, aromatises the whole thing, and you instantly have a rather wonderful cocktail. Be careful, they can catch up on you. But, yeah, what can I say? That is as good basic party fizz as you're going to get. Certainly under a tenner. Let's get a different glass out, shall we? Okay, there we go. Next one is 2 rosés. The reason why I'm very thrilled about them sending me these two, well, because I only picked 2 rosés and they sent them both, which is lovely. One of them was a bit of a surprise, and the other one is a little bit obscure, so I'd love to talk about it. But it also leads me on to talking about other really lovely wines that they sell. All right, explain yourself, Joe. Okay, right, so let's move this stuff out of the way. We've got 2 rosés. One, on this side, is Sancerre Rosé, made by the really rather good but large producer Fournier. There we are. Sancerre Rosé, Tesco's finest, Fournier Père et Fils, 2022. And on this side, we have Arbousset Tavel Rosé. Now, Tavel, or Tavel, Tavel, I would say in French. You notice it's quite dark. It's dark, man. I mean, that's halfway to red wine, isn't it? People keep telling me, pale rosés so over. We're buying dark rosés now. I don't want to be the tail of a fad, but I was telling everyone that rosé should be pale. About 15 years ago, in fact, there was some market research done where people just assumed this country, the darker rosé, the better it was. Now, if you do the research, then it's exactly the opposite, because we've been educated by overpriced and expensive rosés. I say overpriced and expensive because actually they started off overpriced, but they were quite good, and some of them are still very good. But if you say the words Whispering Angel, okay, Whispering Angel started off being one of the best rosés in the world, no question. But they make millions of bottles of it now, and there's just no reason why it should be any better than any other rosé, and it's not. At £20, it's laughable quality. Tesco sells, I think, Leube, Mirabeau from Stephen Cronk and his wife. and Mirabeau Rosé is £16.49, so you're saving yourself about £3 or £4 over a bottle of Whispering Angel, and it's 20 times better. Okay, it's absolutely stunning and delicious. And where Whispering Angel was, I'm not knocking Whispering Angel as a brand. Alexis Lishin's son, Sacha Lishin, who created the Whispering Angel and Chateau d'Esclans Estate, where they make rosés which are £100, right? He's created, he blew the glass ceiling on rosé and created a market for people to appreciate rosé for what it is. And also, when you look at rosé, the packaging is really important. When you drink a bottle of champagne to celebrate, you don't buy the boring bottle of champagne, do you? You buy the one that looks really cool, because everyone knows you're celebrating. And rosé kind of fits that mold. So I think the reason why we've had successful Provence rosé around the world, and why it's become such a big thing, certainly in the UK market, is because it's an alternative to buying champagne in a restaurant. It's not quite as expensive as champagne, but also it's low in acid, so you can drink more. Now, we've got two rosés here, which have been kind of largely forgotten. When you talk about rosé in this country, you're talking about either California rosé, kind of what they call blush, really horrible, sickly, sweet wines, which just taste like wines that haven't finished being made yet. They're just a tinned fruit. But the areas in the world that are famous for making rosé that have kind of been stepped on by the Provence rosé phenomenon are places like Spain. Now, Spain has come back with a vengeance, and Rioja Rosado is world-class rosé, make no mistake, and there are 5 or 6 brilliant wines. In fact, maybe the very best rosé in the world is made actually in Rioja, not in Bondol or in Provence. Send me a message if you want to know which one it is, but it's expensive. But Sancerre Rosé, do you remember that? It's been around for a while. It was invented to sell to the English. I've been told that more than 95% of all Sancerre Rosé is drunk in England. The French don't even know it exists in some cases. They go, oh, it's Sancerre Rosé. I know it has an appellation, but we do not have the wines here. No. I don't know why. I think it was to fill a need for rosé in the UK, and when Sancerre Rosé started being a thing about 20 years ago, it was only about £3 or £4, and then it was £5 or £6. And as Sancerre went from £5 to £10 to £15 to £20, inevitably the rosé followed it. Now, Sancerre Rosé is made from Pinot Noir, which is a very difficult grape variety to make well, and Sancerre is from Central Loire, from the area of Barry, in the centre, and they do make, now there's been such incredibly warm vintages like 2020 and 2019, they do make really wonderful alternatives for Burgundy, actually, and at a lower price. Some of them are really quite stunning. I was very kindly invited on a trip to visit, and I tasted the Pinot Noirs there from these increasingly kind of climate change vintages that we're having, and actually red wine in the Noir, made from Pinot Noir, is really something to be looked at, because they're not the unripe green things they used to be. As the climate's got warmer, these wines are turning into wines that taste like £30 Burgundies. Okay, so, well, where am I going with this? Well, this wine is not cheap. I'm imagining it's about 13 or 14 quid. Where are we? Yep. Sancerre Rosé is £14. It's in a very nice package. It's made for Tesco's. It's on the Tesco's Finest label. And the wonderful Charlotte, who's a great buyer there. She's so talented. She's knocked this out. Now, this wine has won medals recently. And for a Sancerre Rosé to win medals, I'm thinking, oh, get it up. You know, mostly Sancerre Rosé is a bit knackered, a bit rubbish. High in acid. You don't want rosé to be high in acid. And I've never really understood it. I've drunk a few that were special. There's a producer called Francois Cotta, who is like the sort of like cult producer in Sancerre. And his rosés are amazing. Yeah, but they should be. They're like 40 quid. Okay. This wine is £14. And the reason why I've picked it is because we're in this new era of ripe Central Loire wines. And this wine actually smells and actually tastes like Pinot Noir. And if it does that, it has intrinsic value. Because even Burgundy that smells and tastes like Pinot Noir just is 15 quid or even £20. So instead of drinking Burgundy, maybe we should look at Sancerre Reds and Rosés. But the Rosés actually have that wonderful perfumed strawberry-ish brioche nose that some Pinot Noirs, some light red Pinot Noirs have in Burgundy. and the wine isn't sour and sharp. The acidity is muted. It tastes like a pale red, not like a kind of sour red. So I think this wine, if you like your Sancerre Rosé, is a wine that I condone you drink. Normally, I wouldn't. I don't like Sancerre Rosé, can't stand it in the main, but this wine is delicious and would work very, very well with things like lake fish. Think about it, you're in the middle of France, so let's start talking about andouillette, we're talking about eels, we're talking about lake trout, gilt-head bream, omelette chevalier, which is wonderful, Arctic char, all those, like, I know, the French revere river fish in a way that we've kind of forgotten. And yeah, this is really going to be delicious with something like that. Absolutely fantastic. Let's say trout on papillote with a nice bit of veg on the side and a glass of that, and that's summer lunch sorted for you. Okay, there you go. That's the first one. Right, next rosé. Now, why is it so dark? Because typically it is. It's funny because it's made from a grape variety called, mostly from a grape variety called Grenache, which is quite pale in skin, so it's not very dark as a variety itself. But before all this nonsense about Provence Rosé occurred, and all those millionaires down there in Nice and in Monte Carlo started drinking rosé like it was like no tomorrow, which is probably one of the mechanisms which pushed the price of rosé up. And there's a really exquisite region within Provence called Bondol that produces great rosés, but their rosés still have with food, I think. Domaine Tempier Rosé, still world class. But here we have a wine, which is a rosé, which most people won't be familiar with, but it's been an Appellation Contrôlée forever. And if you said what was the most prestigious rosé in France 20 years ago, there was only one answer, and that was Tavel Rosé. This is from the Rhone. It's a Rhone wine, and as such, it's got balls. It's got lots of alcohol. In this case, it says 13.5%, but that would have been considered high then. And the wine has lots of extract and flavour. And this is made by a friend of Charlotte, the Tesco's wine buyers. I think it's a school friend called Julie Aroufiac and her husband. And they make the Côte-du-Rhône Village red wine. They make Châteauneuf de Pape red wine, non-vintage, interestingly, and Châteauneuf de Pape Blanc, all for Tesco's. And they're all flipping delicious. They're all good. If you go to the Tesco's and you think, oh, what did Joe say? I should have something tonight. And you can't remember any of the things I've said. Just fish around the Rhone section and just have a random hit at it. But for about £8 or £9, you can drink the Côte-du-Rhône Village. And it's fantastic. It's really delicious wine. It's a wine that my wife and I drink at home. Tesco's Côte-du-Rhône Village is stunning. And the Châteauneuf de Pape's are wonderful too. The Châteauneuf de Pape white, very, very rare. About 2 or 3% of the appellation is made into white wine. But produces some sublime textured wines. Great with smoked salmon at Christmas. Or maybe even is the perfect white wine to go with roast turkey on the day. Okay, so here we have Tavel Rosé, which is their rosé. I think, if I'm right, Arbousset is actually their house, Julie and her husband's personal estate, if I'm not wrong. I think that's where they live. But look at this colour. It's got this lovely kind of proper... It's not pink anymore. It's red, right? It's like somebody took all the tannin out of a red wine and injected some kind of minerals into it. It's kind of very faintly buttery. It's got a creaminess to it. It has this stony edge, almost a lava-like stony quality to it. I don't know what to say. I think it's a really lovely wine. And it's a wine that traditionally goes with the foods of the area. Great. At the beginning of a meal, although it's quite a full-bodied and quite butch rosé, with some slices of saucisson and some cornichon at the beginning before you sit down to a main meal, or with a nice spit-roasted bit of pig, great with like proper corn-fed chicken. But I'm one to sit down and drink maybe a couple of glasses of this ice cold with lots of like dried ham and charcuterie and things, which is wonderful. But Tavel was the greatest rosé in France for so long, and then fashion dictated they got hidden for a while. But it's time for Tavel to make a comeback. Go, Julie. Your wines are fantastic. I think there's actually a label when you go into the shop that says made by Julie Ruchak on it. Congratulations, you make some stunning wines. On to the last two wines, and these are both red. One would be familiar to many people, I imagine. Prices, there we go. Or less so. This is the first one. It's called The Misfits. Lovely. I love the way the label matches. I think there was a show called Misfits, actually, which had a funny S on it. But this is the Misfits Cinsaut 2021. 2021 was a great vintage, a really great vintage in South Africa, in my opinion, certainly in Stellenbosch. This is made by Ken Forrester Wines. Ken Forrester and I have known each other for a very, very long time, through thick and thin. Some crazy nights would be truthful. He owns one of the finest steak restaurants in the world. Was it 47 Winery Road, I think it's called, in Stellenbosch. Just incredible. And with the 24 rand exchange rate, you can go in there and you can have a tomahawk ribeye, 600 gram ribeye, corn-fed beef, rare breed horned beef for like 15 quid. That's just because we are luckily one of the few countries in the world that's not in the shit like South Africa. So this is made from Cinsaut. Cinsaut is the grape variety, along with Chenin Blanc, which I mentioned in the last show, was the grape variety that was grown everywhere. There was two varieties in South Africa, really. There was Stain, aka Chenin Blanc, and Cinsaut, aka Hermitage. Some dude called Professor Perold, back in the 30s, I think 33, created a cross between Hermitage and Pinot Noir and called it Pinotage. See what he did there? Which is a cross between Cinsaut and Pinot Noir, and has become its own beast. It took a very long time, no longer than other varieties, over hundreds of years in other countries to perfect. But certainly in the last 10 or 20 years, I would say there's been at least 30 world-class wines made in Pinotage from South Africa. That's no exaggeration. And there are different styles coming out. But what's happened is, because of all of this, there's been a look at old vines and where the parentage came from. And Cinsaut, being so widely planted across South Africa, meant there was some very, very, very old vine Cinsaut. And Cinsaut is a great variety, which is no stranger in the Rhone, a little bit in the Midi as well, the Occitanie. And Cinsaut was a great variety which makes extraordinarily good rosé, still does. And you'll also find Cinsaut is widely planted in the Bekaa Valley in Lebanon, where they make also delicious rosé with it. I know, it's also got left behind. So Sancerre was always considered to be one of those sort of working varieties that was designed to make lots of grapes, but not very good ones. But as vines get older, they produce fewer grapes, and the grapes get sexier. And people have managed to translate what Cinsaut can provide into some very poetic wines. If you look at some of the most gifted wine producers in South Africa today, we have to mention people like Ibn Sadi and Adi Badenhorst, who are people that have created this whole new kind of culture of wine away from traditional winemaking, are producing extraordinary drinks with these things. This is the Misfits Cinsaut 2021. Cinsaut is now, because of those people, become such a fashionable variety in its own right. The old vine Cinsaut is expensive. You can pay as much as 40, 50, 60 quid for them, for the top end stuff. Well, the good news is this is Ken Forrester's own stuff. Ken Forrester made this. This is a tenner. There we go. You'll notice that it's quite pale in colour. Cinsaut, like Pinot Noir, has very pale, thin skins. It's really weird. So if you've got Cinsaut Pinot Noir, how come we end up with such a dark variety? I don't know. I don't know science. I'm not a biologist. But anyway, this is a wine which has a typical pale colour that Cinsaut offers. It's only 12.5% alcohol. It's magically perfumed. It has this wonderful smell of lilac and roses, like Chanel No. 5 roses, like perfume roses, like extract of rose. No, it's not like Aunt Granny's knickers. It's not like essence of petunia. It's more like rose water. But it has this wonderful scent to it. But on top of that scent is a very strong core of fruit. It is fruity too. It's kind of like, it might smell of flowers, but you'd like a jam made out of it. Do you know what I mean? So there's this smell of wild strawberry. And by the way, I can't remember which supermarket it is. Spar in South Africa produces a wild strawberry and rose jam, which we bring back when we come over, and it's absolutely delicious. And actually, now I'm smelling that, that's what it's reminding me of. But also, my mother's Swedish. Traditionally, we used to pick big rose hips, giant rose hips from the dunes near the sea, which make a thing called nippon soppa, which is rose hip soup. It has this wonderful, tangy, sweet sourness, wonderful, sharp, cordial, a bit like elderberry, I think. So you can imagine all those smells together, and a hint of oak, some slight woodiness to it. There you have that. It's a refreshing, perfumed, light on the palate. I suppose what we've got here is a South African Beaujolais of sorts, because it's not weighty in any way, but it's interesting, it's fascinating. There's lots of flavour there. And I would have that with, I don't know, roast salmon or a fish curry or something like that. Very, very nice wine. But to see Tesco's leading the charge with this wine, I think it's absolutely fantastic. For 10 quid, banging. It's almost like we round the clock back to before YouTube existed. But this is probably one of the most familiar labels on the shelf anywhere. The word Penfolds is about as strong an guarantee of quality in Australia than anything that I can think of. Anything at all. It's like saying Mercedes-Benz. Do they make some shit wines? Well, they make Snoop Dogg's 19 Crimes, which is absolute piss. But with the Penfolds label on the front, they wouldn't dare. Even Rawson's a treat. I remember when I was buying Riesling, Bin 202 Riesling, for $3.99 when I was non-Bins manager. That's how much it used to cost. And these wines were all miraculously good wines, and they never ever released a bad wine. And Penfolds is the absolute sine qua non plus ultra, most successful and most reliable brand of wine in the whole of Australia. This was largely, to start with, down to a great winemaker from the 50s, 60s, 70s, right through to the late 80s, called Max Schubert. And Max Schubert went against the company policies and stuff and started making wines using techniques he'd heard from other people, doing things in a different way. And when everyone was very conformist, and all the journalists in the 50s drank his wine, they used to say, oh, we don't know what this guy's doing, but his wines taste of crushed ants. That was a description used once. Formic acid. But he made a wine called Grange. Penfolds Grange, Bin 95 Grange. Which is now, without any compare, the most famous wine in Australia. And I don't know what last year's vintage sold for, but it was about £450. I've been very fortunate. My parents had several, we had 11 vintages of Penfolds Grange on the list in Mum and Dad's pub in the New Forest during the 90s, and the most expensive one was 65 quid, and we couldn't sell it. Dagnam it. Penfolds makes some extraordinary wine. Now let's go back down to Terra Firma. Pardon me for the cough. Koonunga Hill Shiraz and Koonunga Hill, there was a Koonunga Hill Chardonnay. These were the everyday bog standard wines being produced by Penfolds for everyday drinkers in Australia, along with Hardy's, who were producing a wine which was kind of their competitor, which was called Nottage Hill. And these wines were all really great value for money. And when I think about when I first got into wine in the early 90s, and had a chance to visit the country in the 90s, these wines were seen as, all right, mate, but they'll age properly. They'll age like a proper bottle of bloody wine. And I think somebody opened a bottle of 1985 Koonunga Hill for me the other day, which is a wine that would have cost $2.99 on the shelf. And when I drank it, 38 years old, it was absolutely incredible. And so, yeah, I trust Penfolds, if they put Penfolds on the label, to make wines that age and behave the way that great wine should. Enough of that bollocks, right? It's 2021. Shiraz. Cabernet Shiraz is more famous for Koonunga Hill, but Mr. Graham Nash bought the Koonunga Shiraz, which was an extremely wise move. The first vintage they made a straight Shiraz was 2002. And this 2021 is frankly fantastic, world-class, show me a better one, Australian Barossa Shiraz, which is becoming rare because I either can't afford it or they don't make the wines the way they used to. But this wine, look at that colour, right? This is Shiraz. It's got a brick red tinge, but it's Australian Shiraz, so you can't see through it. Glass, okay. Smells. You can smell American oak as well as French oak, but you've got this like toastiness to it. You can smell pine cones and red fruits, mulberry spice. So Christmassy for a red. Oz Clarke, many, many years ago. Yes, of course, the great Oz Clarke. One of the reasons why I'm in this industry, one of the few people that helped me when other people wouldn't. And I have nothing but love for that man. And I remember him saying that, I can't remember what I was going to say now, but he was talking about Australian Shiraz and said that look, Australian Shiraz should have certain flavours. And he said it should have a kind of mintiness to it, kind of like a buttery mint, like a Murray mint to it. And it should have deep, deep bramble fruit, almost a hint of rum from the oak. So, and he said, but every now and then, because of the winemaking, it's not necessarily that clean. So he would talk about Murray mints, rum and hamster cages. Well, the hamster cages are gladly missing from this particular outfit. But, oh yes, this is what Oz Clarke said. He said, look, when you look at turkey as a meat at Christmas, it's very, very hard to match because it doesn't taste very nice. And I agree with him. It's also texturally quite dry and fibrous. So if you have a thin or a light wine, you can still feel the fibrousness to it. It's much easier to match it with a white. And I would think particularly Alsace Pinot Gris works very well with roast turkey at Christmas. But he was a firm believer you should go for a balls out Australian Shiraz with the year in an American oak. And he's really not wrong. If you like a red wine on Christmas Day, and let's face it, something more celebratory about red wine, pick this. You know, if you're hard up, have a corn-fed chicken and a bottle of Koonunga Hill Shiraz 2021. You don't need the turkey. You don't need the expensive Burgundy. You'll just have a really good day. I don't know who I'm going to do next, but see you next time.